Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 22 team selection. We're going to recap how my team did in Game Week 21, which wasn't great, and then we're going to jump into the match week odds for Game Week 22, plus discuss my transfers or potential transfers for Game Week 22. At this moment in time, I haven't really locked in a move. I haven't done an early transfer. The time gap between 21 and 22 just meant that there were so many games that I could just watch the games, watch how, certain teams lined up, especially with, new teams with new managers. Unfortunately, we don't have the best of information, I would say. What I would mention is that I think Semenyo is a big domino in terms of him impacting all the City midfielders in the game, including himself. I think he actually seems like he's in a really good spot for minutes because I think the preferred sort of double wing structure of Semenyo and Doku is something we're going to continually see for the rest of the season. But it also means that there's a lot more depth now in the midfield because Turkey has to find a place to play football as he's still continuing to just really assert himself as someone who is quite key to the City team, regardless of whether he can have some low lows. I think he's got the highest highs of this Man City team in terms of just what he can bring to a football match, and that's a problem. So when I look at my Game Week 21 team, 46 points was not the best, but then I think in terms of decisions, I felt quite rewarded by actually playing Krupi Jr. Was really confident that he was going to play good minutes after it was announced that Kluivert had a knee injury, and not only a knee injury, but rather had surgery immediately after the injury. So to me, Krupi Jr.'s minutes are going to look fantastic going ahead. That's not just necessarily because Semenyo's out the club, but more so I think specifically within those sort of central positions, you have much less depth now. And I think even Enes Unal potentially is injured as well. So it's a really good position to be a Krupi Jr. owner, and I think he's going to be a big asset for me coming up in the future. Lefebvre missed a penalty, but I actually think he almost sort of redeemed himself a little bit within the AFL Cup. I feel like listening to his post-match interview comments versus Everton in the FA Cup that it seems like he's most likely going to keep penalties unless Granit Xhaka is going to take them away from him. What I'm concerned about when I look at my team is Foden's minutes, O'Reilly's minutes, Saka's performances, but these are more problems for the future. More pressing problems will be Keane and his red card, which has been confirmed and upheld with the sort of 3-match ban. And yeah, as a general problem, right? Losing penalties now, losing set pieces, and no real interest in owning someone like Cunha when Bruno's back. And that's pretty much the state of the team. We have 2 Liverpool players who play versus Burnley at home. Hopefully they play versus Burnley at home, and we can probably disperse with them in Game Week 24. Although I think when I look at Ekitike now, because Thiago's fixture run isn't the best, I could probably be keeping Ekitike. Part of that is also because if players like Foden and Saka just really aren't delivering, I don't think necessarily Ekitike is the one that I have to kind of funnel out of my team. If anything, I'm probably looking towards those players as transfers out in the future as well. Not to mention O'Reilly, where O'Reilly recently has been playing as the 6 for City, and I think that's kind of given him, increased ability to play more minutes within the team. But the concern always is going to be with Max Elaine playing so well, with Ake reinserting himself back into the squad, and then Ryan Nuri coming back from AFCON and immediately getting an assist in the AFL Cup. What that means for Nico O'Reilly's minutes. I think as a defender, you just need someone who just is going to guarantee you playing 60 plus minutes a game. I'm no longer confident that he's really going to do that in the medium to long term. Now, in the short term, I think we can probably try to nail down the City minutes. You might even have leaks here in Game Week 22, which will also incentivize how I, make decisions around my team. But as things stand, I think Keane and Cunha are the pressing points. But do I need to address them is sort of the question that I'll leave myself as I head into this game week with 2 free transfers. In terms of suggested transfers for this week, I think when I look at actually plugging my team within the Fantasy Football Hub AI transfer tool, the suggestions are actually to take players like Keane out of the team, to take players like potentially even Soba out of the team, and Cunha as well. I think those are the options that appeal the most to me. They're pretty much congruent with my thinking. But if you want to actually have a look at suggested transfers yourself for your team, and you're maybe stuck as well, feeling like many other FPL managers are right now, where we've got 4 to 5 problems in the team, but then it's very hard to also justify like who's going to be the transfer in other than the players who've been doing exceptionally well as of late, like a Bruno G, a Harry Wilson, etc., etc. So that's kind of the conundrum that we all have, but I think there are priority transfers. And if you want to assess what are the priority transfers for you, have a look at the link in description below to get your AI suggested transfers. So within my team, or rather with this game week, right, just looking at the macro picture, we're going to look at the 11-5 match odds for this week in Game Week 22. You can have a look at his own website, which has a team strength model that I really much back and has performed very well against the market odds, season on season now. For this week, I would say it's an interesting buy point for Aston Villa players, not necessarily maybe for the attacking point of view, but we've seen Everton do really poorly on defense, especially the Brentford game is like a good example of that. So, across the board, I think it's a pretty good entry point. But I'm thinking an Aston Villa defender like Cash could be quite interesting for certain managers. If you're looking for a differential pick as well, Rodgers and Watkins have become super popular as of late, but not that popular, right? And I think they can continue to become better picks going forwards as the Aston Villa run is only going to get better. With Brighton versus Bournemouth, I think that's a classic both teams to score type game right there on paper. I'm pretty excited at maybe just getting the chance to throw out Krupi Jr. I'm probably going to pursue that this game week, and that really just depends on what type of moves I'm making this week as well, because I kind of like a couple defenders over Krupi Jr. if I make defensive moves, but at the same time, if I'm not going to do that, then I can see myself playing him. Chelsea versus Brentford will be interesting because I think I haven't been too impressed with, let's say, Chelsea in the way that they played versus Arsenal. We saw a couple Sanchez mistakes. At the same time, I don't think you're coming into every single game expecting that a team that's going to play out the back like the way that Chelsea did versus Arsenal is going to have that many mistakes per match, but that is plausible now. And we'll see what happens with someone like Robert Sanchez. I don't think Chelsea's a poor team. This is a really good home game for Chelsea and the start or a pseudo start of their fixture run, because I think one of the things with Chelsea that's helpful in terms of information is you want to see how they perform within the Champions League in the midweek after Chelsea versus Brentford, just so you can assess whether or not they're going to reasonably make the top 8 within the Champions League. I think it's quite likely that they beat Paphos, so maybe it doesn't really change things, but you can probably also see where they're at in terms of the group table to be able to make better decisions. And not only that, but you get information on someone like Cole Palmer. So something that I've been thinking about for this game week is, even though Cole Palmer doesn't really scream buy because he's been protected for the recent matches, my overall thoughts are, could we still wait for Gameweek 24 to reinsert him back in the team? And I think Enzo's still a very good pick. I would not look at the Chelsea versus Arsenal game as a good representation of what Enzo can bring to the table for a football match. Caicedo was suspended. Reece James was rested for this match as well. So there's really no reason to think that someone like, let's say, Enzo is going to continue to play deep. I don't think that that's the case at all. What I will say is that I think Andre Santos is going to be a much more key part of the side. So that still is going to have a negative impact on, in my opinion, Enzo's minutes, especially if you can play more minutes of, let's say, players like James, players like Gusto, and you get those players on the pitch. And the question is going to be, who's going to suffer from that? And I think Enzo is minorly going to suffer. But yeah, great game and a good time to actually buy a Chelsea defender. So someone like Chalobah, I think, makes a lot of sense for managers. Leeds versus Fulham is not the best game, but I think, once again, I think Fulham are actually about to embark on a pretty good fixture run here. So it's a decent buy point to get a Leeds player on the team. So let's say you're trying to downsize in the forward position. Calvert-Lewin is there. If you're looking at, let's say, a cheap budget option for defense, I think Gudmundsson and Rodon are back. Fulham, it's really just the Harry Wilson show, but Raul is also around. However, we do think that Muniz will come back in around a month's time. So I suppose, how long do you need a forward who is going to play at a little bit more of an expensive position compared to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and probably is ultimately a bit worse? I think it's tough to justify Raul at this moment in time, but he's performed well. Liverpool versus Burnley is the key game. I find it tricky to sort of justify telling people that they should buy Liverpool assets. I'm obviously sort of pre-invested, if that makes sense. I have 2 Liverpool players that I actually think after this game week, you can kind of justify selling, or at least after game week 23, where they play versus Bournemouth, who just still, even though they've been playing well at home, are a pretty poor defense. So the way that I see things for Liverpool is, I think if you're wildcarding on 24, you can justify buying a Liverpool player now, unless you want to buy a defender this week where there's going to be a little bit more rotations placed in there. For just buying Liverpool outright, if you're not going to plan to wildcard anytime soon, it's really hard to justify because Liverpool's fixtures do turn pretty poor. As far as United and City, this is the first game with a new United manager. I think City have, I wouldn't say turned a page, but I think Haaland has looked pretty exhausted. Pep has pretty much confirmed that as well. He's not been scoring goals at the sort of lightning rate at the start of the season, but there's also no reason to sort of justify, not having Haaland in your team. So, or even as a captaincy option. I personally am looking at, let's say, going against Haaland captaincy. So we'll just see how things go, but it's kind of hard to justify that, especially if I can't guarantee good Ekitike minutes, since he's coming off of a hamstring injury himself and, probably won't be used for the full match because Liverpool have to also play a very tough Champions League game versus Marseille. So with United, I think because it's a home game, I think this is still a decent entry point for Bruno, partially because the midfield landscape is so dire. I'm really struggling to actually find midfielders that I genuinely like myself. I think Bruno is one of the best midfielders that you're just never going to feel bad owning for the rest of the season. Whereas I own players like Cunha, like even Foden with a question mark, that are just still problems within my team. And I know that if I bring Bruno back to my team, even though he's got Arsenal away next week, he's still going to be quite interesting. Outside of that, I think this is actually a pretty good re-entry point for Crystal Palace defense. If you've kind of moved off of it recently, I think actually if you're shopping for a defender at a decent price point, there's a lot of Palace defenders that you can go for. Other than that, I think we're all pre-invested into Arsenal. This is still a good game. Really, really, really good opportunity to keep a clean sheet here. Saka played a lot of minutes in the AFL Cup, so I think that's really not nice. But then I can also see that Madueke's minutes could possibly still go towards the Champions League because of Arsenal's kind of luxurious position in the Champions League. As far as Spurs versus West Ham, decent entry point, but who is there to buy for Spurs? It's kind of a tricky question to answer because this is such a good fixture. But I don't have any confidence that I'd really want to buy a Spurs pick at this moment. And then with Wolves versus Newcastle, Mane's been exceptional, but I guess you can put him in a wild card, but I wouldn't be using transfers on him. And then with Newcastle, this to me just screams more so clean sheet than anything because Wolves have actually kept, really good sort of XGC numbers. So I don't think that the Newcastle attacks could have set things alight here, but you have a pretty good opportunity at getting a clean sheet because Wolves similarly have not been that good as an attack. Like even some of the recent goals being scored have been sort of from low XG shots. It's not like Wolves have suddenly become a top team overnight, and certainly not in terms of the attacking phase of things. I think the defense is actually still very, very, very solid. So yeah, that's kind of my recap of the game week. It's a bit of a middling game week, but I think because probably a lot of us are feeling that we have bad eggs in the team, it's still an opportunity to buy, right? An opportunity to buy someone like maybe Tavernier, who's involved in the Bournemouth game, an opportunity to just get back into Bruno at this point in time, and go for players that are probably going to be a little bit more well-rounded in the medium to long term, as opposed to pursuing the best fixture this week, like a Liverpool versus Burnley. But that's kind of just my overall take. It's also still a good opportunity to actually own Sunderland defense, right? To kind of jump onto that if you're in need of someone who's going to be a cash cow and to turn that into an Alderete, into a Mukiele. As far as my team selection this week, my initial conclusion is that I do need to make a midfield transfer. So I think assuming that the defensive transfer is open, I think I've almost got a pair of moves that I would like to make that either I can make sort of an A path or a B path. So on the A path, I'm going to assume that I'm going to play a little bit more passive this game week. So that means that I'm going to play Ryan Gabriel versus Nottingham Forest away, Richards versus Sunderland away, which is massive, right? He actually played the full match in the FA Cup. Now, obviously, Richards was unfortunately part of the quote-unquote greatest FA Cup upset in history, which is obviously a great narrative. Not a great narrative for Crystal Palace, given that they were the previous holders of the title. But yeah, I mean, I like Richards just being back. You're going to have at least the Guehi, Richards, and Lacroix backline at it, most likely also supported by Canvo on the right, as opposed to maybe Devaney. So hopefully that's a little bit more defensive compared to, let's say, playing Devaney at right wing back. I'm intending to play O'Reilly. I think that he should still start left back because the minutes that have been thrown into Ake recently, I'm kind of shocked if he starts 3 fixtures in a row. I could be wrong. Yes, O'Reilly has mostly played the minutes in the last 2 matches in the 6th position, so maybe it just suggests that Pep is kind of moving away from the Nico O'Reilly left back experiment. But I'm willing to take a punt here. If I feel a little bit cold about this, or simply, if I have to be completely honest, if we have leaks, if we get information on O'Reilly, I'm happy to just simply play Anderson this week. It's kind of a pursuing DEFCON play. I don't really think that Anderson is going to get a clean sheet versus Leeds away at least. But I mean, this is still an opportunity to just play someone who's really good at DEFCON, most likely is going to get DEFCON given the way that Leeds play, and save a defensive transfer for another week, because I have an opportunity, sure, this week with the amount of money that I have in the bank to just simply make a move, like let's say going into Virgil. But I've got no interest in Virgil. I don't even have interest in Konate. So I'm kind of struggling to say I want to buy a Liverpool player here ahead of some pretty tough fixtures like Bournemouth away, Newcastle at home, City at home. So the next real playable game for me for a Liverpool defender is Gameweek 26, where I think that's kind of where the run starts again for Liverpool. I'd rather wait for a few game weeks to actually buy a Liverpool defender as opposed to kind of shelve them after Burnley at home. But I do need to also consider, whether I am actually planning to make too many moves later down the line, and maybe Virgil could still make sense. But for now, on this transfer path, on transfer path A, I'm not going to make a move. In the midfield, shifting over gears to that, I'm going to go Sobbo versus Burnley at home. This is one of his last 2 games for me. Lefebvre versus Crystal Palace. I still think he's on penalties. I think he's a decent def corner. He's kind of your all-rounder. A lot of us have invested into picks like Stack, like Garner. I don't think he's too, far removed from some of these players. It is a bit of a sort of counter matchup in terms of Richards versus Lefebvre, but both players are very good at DEFCON, so it's kind of worst case scenario. I've got DEFCONers. Foden, Saka, Cunha, but Cunha actually gone is how the team is going to look like as well for me in the midfield. I think Foden plays versus Man United away. With Foden, I think the tricky situation here is that I feel like the reason why I want to roll my free transfers is because I think that players like Foden could be problem owns within my team. I'd rather have more free transfers in the bank to be able to address someone like him in the future. With Saka, I think he's not a problem for me because in a landscape where, let's say, Palmer doesn't seem like he's fit and ready to play football consistently, in a landscape where we still think that, let's say, the Salah situation is a bit murky, there's no real reason to spend money in the game. So I think that the counter argument is simply, okay, someone like Rice might be performing better than Saka, and I think that's fair to say. You look at even, let's say, the Arsenal match versus Chelsea, and Rice would have, let's say, outscored him right within that match. And I think that's a fair point to make. But is it a pressing transfer for me? I don't think so. So Saka stays by order of being like the least, I guess, worst player in my team, which is not something that's nice to say when I've got 5 midfielders that I don't really love altogether. But yeah, Cunha ultimately is going to go out for Bruno on this transfer path. The reason why I kind of like to go into Bruno here is because if I'm not going to go for Virgil, I don't really need to spend money on defense. So instead of spending money on defense, I'd rather just spend the money in the midfield. And so Cunha to Bruno is something that I can afford with one free transfer. Why not just do that? Lock in a player who's going to play 90 minutes every single match. I'm already frustrated enough by players who play in the Champions League, in multiple cup competitions, and just mean that these players actually have less minutes than we would want to have, right? Foden, as we can see, the minutes are sort of declining, in my opinion. And I think that's seeping into even the Premier League as well, where he's usually actually been really good for minutes. But Semenyo is a genuine problem for the team because he is actually creating a threat for minutes, unlike Savinho. With Lefebvre, his minutes are perfect, so I'm not really going to touch him, especially when he's got fixtures like West Ham in the future. With Sobbo, as I said, he's got 2 decent fixtures and hopefully good minutes over those fixtures, barring, I don't know how Slot's going to respond to that little gaff there within the FA Cup match versus Barnsley. As far as the front line, we're going to go Ekitike and Haaland. We've suffered enough, hopefully, TM versus Thiago for the last few weeks. I'm really hoping here that Ekitike can kind of bring the swing a little bit downwards, in my favor. It's been pretty brutal. I don't feel too bad about the decision, other than I think that was me being a bit too aggressive. But when you're sort of presented with 5 free transfers in FPL, I'm not in the business of sort of burning free transfers. So yeah, it is what it is. I think when you look at Thiago before these matches where he's obviously just gone on a blistering run in terms of great open play chances, great shots, great movement, the previous matches were awful. And a lot of his goals in the previous games before that, before the 5-goal streak, were penalties. So do I feel that bad about the play? Not really, because I think I don't expect too many strikers heading in towards Everton away to get a massive haul, and he did. And fair play to that. And fair play to managers who have held. So that's that. We're going to keep Ekitike here, at least I think for the foreseeable, and actually keep him with Haaland, because if you look at the Brentford fixture run, I think you've got one good fixture here in Gameweek 23, which is Nottingham Forest at home, but 22 is Chelsea away. After that, you've still got really tough games like Aston Villa away and then Newcastle away. So is there really an opportunity for me to move into Thiago until 26/28? I don't think so. I'm going to wait. So in the sort of substitution lineup for this week, I'm going to play Dubravka, Krupi Jr., Anderson at this moment in time. Then Keane obviously is suspended. But something I've been thinking about, of course, is can I get Krupi Jr. playing for this game week? My answer is probably not, unfortunately, because I think Krupi Jr. will play good minutes, like 65, 70 minutes, and it's Brighton away. If it was a better match, I think I would bench Lefebvre for this. It is, of course, me playing Lefebvre versus Richard, so I think the question is going to be, could I not play Krupi Jr. over Lefebvre? Right now, I feel a little bit more comfortable just owning Lefebvre. I could be wrong, and that could be the wrong idea, but having him as an auto sub is not the worst feeling in the world. And then, as I said, Anderson over O'Reilly in terms of like bench order, or rather O'Reilly over Anderson in terms of starting order. So that's kind of how I'm going to have my team set up in terms of captaincy. Right now, I actually have it on Haaland, but the vice captaincy is definitely on Ekitike. And I am really considering just going to play the captaincy on Ekitike. The problem for me is going to be that Liverpool turnaround with the Champions League. I think that, especially as I said, with Ekitike coming back from an injury and Marseille being a pretty important game, that being an away game, it's kind of hard to see how Ekitike is going to have perfect minutes. At the same time, I have absolutely zero interest in captaining Sobo versus Burnley at home. As interesting as Sobo could be with, long shots, with set piece assists, and I wouldn't even say potential DEFCON because I haven't seen it in I don't know how many matches that I've owned Sobo. He's just not come remotely close. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with my team. Let me know what your thoughts are in terms of captaincy. I'm actually quite intrigued to see if people are considering things like Ekitike captain. Palmer is most likely going to play versus Brentford, so I think for people who might have already invested into Palmer, like he's a captaincy option as well, so I think that could be interesting. But I'd like to hear, what moves that people are making for this game, because I think that can kind of help me with even some of my thoughts in terms of my team. But my B path in terms of my transfer B path is actually to make two moves, right? To be a bit more aggressive with the game week and to be a little bit more short-term aggressive. As I mentioned, I don't like the idea too much of buying a Liverpool defender, but I think it's more justifiable to say that you can buy a Liverpool defender and shelve him as opposed to buying a midfielder. However, I think Wirtz is actually playing really, really well. So Cunha to Wirtz is probably the move that in my head, if I think I was going for a wildcard 24 because I kind of hate my team, that could be a move that I could pursue. That would be very aggressive, but I think kind of ticks all the boxes in terms of Wirtz has actually been very interesting for Liverpool as of late. I kind of have to apologize or issue an apology to Wirtz because I think he's just played really well and is looking like he's actually clicked into gear. For, let's say, the midfield transfer, though, if I just go off the back of the Virgil move, clearly I would bench both O'Reilly and Anderson here. Keane would leave my team. So that would mean that I play Raya, Gabriel, Richards, Virgil. In the midfield, though, I would not be able to afford Bruno this week. I would be kind of parking Bruno for a Gameweek 24 transfer plan. So instead, I'll have Sobo, Lafay, Foden, Saka, and actually Marcus Tavernier. I do think Tavernier is actually just at an absolute elite price point, considering that he is a jack of all trades, technically a master of none, sort of like Lefay, but has full pen share, and I think you can say that it's guaranteed. Probably plays for a better attacking team at the end of the day, and is at a price point where you can justify someone sort of operating on that level. And then, of course, Ekitike and Haaland with no changes to captaincies and things like that. So let me know what your thoughts are in terms of like transfers path A and B. As I said, the reason why I kind of like making transfer path A is even though, yes, I lock myself into Bruno, that's never a problem in FPL. And I think I give myself a little bit more optionality in terms of who I want to go for in defense. Like I can save that defender transfer for a future game week, like maybe game week 23, like maybe game week 24. And equally, I think it's an opportunity to just be a little bit more better equipped for next week, especially if there are some random benchings that I'm expecting to happen for a team like Liverpool or a team like, let's say, even Man City coming off of a Champions League game and very, very little rest, given that they've been involved in cup competitions. So that's kind of where my thoughts lie in terms of my team selection. I hope you guys have the best game week ahead and, look forward to the cheat sheet, which is going to drop tomorrow. But I'll see you guys soon. Take care and goodbye.